We invite you to discover a very special place in the Alps, the Aosta Valley. Considered the most French of all the regions in Italy, it's surrounded by some of the highest mountains in Europe, from Mont Blanc to Monte Rosa. Franco-Provençal is spoken in these valleys. This is a legacy of the Valdôtain culture, which is found also in the regional architectures as well as on the tables of the local restaurants. Unlike those on the French side of Mont Blanc, the valleys on the Aostan side still preserve many traditions to which the Valdôtains are very much attached. Follow us and discover these valleys, sometimes intimate, yet each more astonishing than the last. The Aosta Valley successively belonged to the Kingdom of Burgundy, then to the House of Savoy. Yet, despite historical turmoil, the region has always benefited from a singularly autonomous status that it still retains today. Of course, the central pivot of the Aosta Valley is Mont Blanc. Rising to 4,807 meters above sea level, it's the highest mountain in the Alps. Here it reigns like a gigantic dome of ice overlooking the ridgeline between France and Italy. At its foot are Courmayeur and Chamonix, resorts that have become world famous, and justly so, because of this majestic mountain that dominates them. Of the two sides of Mont Blanc, the Italian side is the more severe looking. The appearance of these high rock faces changes depending on where they are seen from. This apparent bleakness has not prevented Courmayeur, like its French counterpart Chamonix, from boasting many well-known ski slopes at the foot of the Lord of the Alps. The international fame of Courmayeur was, however, first linked not to winter sports but to thermal tourism, which began in the 17th century. Its sulphurous spring waters have attracted many visitors, including the kings of Italy during the mid-19th century. Then Alpinism was born. This brought even greater international fame, making this commune the capital of Italian alpinism. Forests are an integral part of life for the Valdôtains. So it comes as no surprise to discover that the inhabitants of the valley are excellent woodworkers, such as here at the Clavel Carpentry Workshop in Courmayeur. The shop makes simple, sometimes even rustic furniture, yet always with an Alpine touch that gives these products their unique charm. Walnut, less expensive and easier to work, is most often used, but pine is also found in many chalets.
We use old wood, wood that we recuperate from old houses that are being renovated. So we take the old wood that's part of the house and we give it a new life by focusing on the beauty of these old woods.
These forests that supply the artisans with both natural materials as well as inspiration don flamboyant colors when autumn arrives, like here around the lake of Alpi. At 2,066 meters above sea level, the lake of Alpi is encircled by Mont Charvet, Becca Pugnenta and Mont Cogne. The presence of trout and a very rare species of amphibian, the Alpine newt, prove that the water is very pure. When the horizon is clear, the view of the Grand Joras is simply spectacular. The area around the lake is equally grandiose. La Thuile is a winter sports resort located in a glacial basin that was carved out by the Routor Glacier. La Thuile was, along with the Tarentaise and Maurienne valleys, one of the first possessions of the House of Savoy in the 10th century. It played an important military role between the 18th century and the first half of the 20th. The Little St. Bernard Pass held the strategic control of the Tarentaise region and the Duchy of Aosta. Further down the valley, Pré Saint-Didier and its hot springs with their source in the Oreador Canyon are a much appreciated stopover for anyone who has spent an active day in the mountains. Even though the thermal spa only dates from 1834, the hot water sources in the region were known long before that. Their historic, even antique recognition dates back to the Roman period. Later, they became one of the principal centres of attraction of the Aosta Valley, as well as the favourite holiday destination for the royal family of Savoy. When leaving La Thuile for the Little St. Bernard Pass, pay close attention. It would be a shame to miss the village of Pont-Serrand and the chapel of St. Bernard de Montjoux, the patron saint of mountaineers and travellers. If we wander away from the main road, we find small mountain paths that lead to alpine farms. Their remoteness is a guarantee of extra tranquility. We're near the alpine pastures of Vernay Lake at Davide Ramirez farm. His cows and bulls have been up in the pastures a good part of the day and are now finishing their siesta. This morning, for example, the cows climbed to the mountain pastures in search of the best grass. That's at 2,700 meters. The grass at that altitude is not really abundant, but it gives a very special taste. Here we make tome cheese. These are fresh tome. They're chili-flavored tome. And here's the queen of our cheeses, Fontina. Fontina is a raw milk cheese. We make it twice a day. We milk the cows twice a day, once in the morning and once in the evening. This is a Fontina that we made this morning. That's about 6 hours ago. And we put the Fontina into these molds. After 12 hours, we dip them in brine. And then we take them out and place them on wooden planks where they stay for 3 months. We turn them every day. And we rub them with the brine. It's early September, and lower down in the valley, the grape harvest has begun in the highest vineyards in Europe, between Morgex and La Salle. The famous Prié Blanc variety is grown here. It's the only Valdôtain cultivar known over the centuries to be able to withstand the harsh conditions of this mountain region. Here, the older people still speak Franco-Provençal.
It's the first day of harvesting here in Morgex. We're going to take the grapes to the cooperative. And as you can see, it's a splendid day, contrary to other days in the past when it was rather cold.
We're off to visit Mauro Giacod. He's also starting his harvest. He explains to us that this is a single vine.
This
is a Prié Blanc variety. It's about 180 years old, more or less. This single and unique vine covers an entire side of the house. It can produce up to 80 kilos of grapes. The entire valley is covered by small family parcels. In order to better exploit the ground heat and avoid wind and frost damage in winter, the vines are trained on low pergolas. They need air and sun. If we put them too low, they can't breathe. They just can't survive. Today, the cooperative consists of 80 families. They bring their grapes to the communal press. The wine they obtain is authentic and original. It's appreciated by many wine lovers. We're heading for the Cogne Valley, the entrance to the Gran Paradiso National Park, whose highest peak is over 4,000 meters high. At 1,500 meters, the village sometimes resembles an open-air museum with its monumental sculptures. We're at Dorino Ouvrier's workshop. He's a well-known local artist who uses wood to depict the traditional lifestyle of his valley, recounting its legends as well as the hard labor of its inhabitants. This is cherry wood. I've had this trunk here for 20 years now, just waiting to be turned into a sculpture. It's a very hard wood. It's not easy. He has undertaken a rather special subject. It's the Last Judgment. I've done it as I imagined it. I don't know if it's very good or not. I've carved a whole array of characters. It's not exactly hell, it's more people being judged for their sins. I've made the devil. I did all this. It's the way I see it. I like carving large sculptures. I began over 20 years ago, and I've made many large sculptures. But I make small ones as well, a bit of everything. At 74 years of age, Dorino is one of the leading artists of this Valdôtain school, where religion is consciously mocked, but with respect. His works are also a testimony to the harsh life in these high mountain villages. Leaving Valnonté, we climb towards the Lauzon Valley. There are several small alpine hamlets along the way. The Gran Paradiso National Park, opened in 1922, succeeded the Royal Hunting Reserve of King Victor Emmanuel II, which he created in 1856 to protect the alpine ibex, then in danger of extinction. This protected area is officially the oldest Italian national park. Today there are more than 3,000 ibex that prefer to remain at the higher altitude, whereas the 8,000 chamois in the park more willingly descend towards the hamlets in search of food. We have a framework in which the animals are protected, It's a fragile environment, so the park's very important. This magnificent wooden house overlooking the small village of Valnonte is the sanctuary of painter Barbara Tuttino. She's passionate about the mountains and everything that concerns them. She's produced a book about the alpinist Walter Bonatti. Bonatti was responsible for many feats in the 1950s and 60s. He's particularly famous for having opened, solo, a direct route on the northern face of the Matterhorn.
Voilà.
To pay homage to the natural forces of the world surrounding her, Barbara Tuttino likes to work in rough materials.
This is sheet metal. It's iron sheeting. We have stone roofs here, and under the stones, we put this sheeting. When the roofs are being repaired, I collect the old sheeting that's being thrown out. It's a nice material to work with. The paints play with the background, with the material itself. I like the sound too. These are the old blackboards from schools. They're not used anymore. This is a bilingual region. We study French at school from the very first day. Formerly, it was the common language for everyone. Here, everybody spoke a patois. Every small village had its own patois. And in Cogne, there were even differences between the villages.
Outside of Aosta, near the city airport, Igor Charbonnier takes advantage of the fine weather conditions to take a small group out and to discover the valley from the air. The view is quite startling. The central axis of the valley is surrounded by peaks of over 4,000 meters high for as far as the eye can see. Because we're in the Alps. There are mountains all around us. All around. It's 99% mountain. The region's capital has given its name to the entire valley, Aosta. The city was founded in the 1st century BC. Numerous ancient remains, such as the Praetorian Gate, attest to the importance of the region for the Romans. The valley was both a crucial hub for foreign trade, as well as a strategic location for their conquest of Gaul. At the end of January, the town busily prepares for the Fair of St. Ursus. This fair dates back to the Middle Ages. A mixture of artists and vendors, it's above all an opportunity for the inhabitants of the region to affirm their attachment to their Valdôtain culture. Craftsmen and artists alike expose their best works in the historic streets. The Roman city was founded in 25 BC. The amphitheatre was built under the Emperor Claudius in AD 50. The cathedral dates from the 11th century and is another emblem of the city. Even though it was modified over the centuries, the church still retains many decorative elements that are typically Valdôtain, elements that can still be seen in other religious buildings in the valley. At the fair, the better-known artists as well as many artisans invest in sturdy covered stands. This is Mauro Savin's stand. He's one of the last surviving makers of high-quality cowbells. For him, the fair is a unique occasion to meet the herders and shepherds who buy his bells. Gastronomy is also well represented at the fair, be it cheeses, honey or charcuterie. And in case you need to warm up, fondues and polentas are sold on the street corners. Here's a favourite sight amongst visitors, the cloister of Saint Ursus. This Romanesque ensemble was the work of Provençal or Lombard master craftsmen. An inscription on one of the capitals suggests that the cloister very probably dates from 1133. This was even before a papal bull of Pope Innocent II imposed the rule of St. Augustine, which regulated the life of monasteries such as St. Ursus. The capitals are sculpted in marble but were covered with black paint long ago. They complement the other single and double columns and admirably depict scenes from the Old and New Testaments. The Fair of St. Ursus runs late into the night. Improvised concerts, choirs, any pretext is good for gathering together and sharing good times. A tour of the cellars is another such pretext, but this time it's reserved for the happy few for whom the night will continue underground in cellars impossible to find without being part of the initiated. They will end the night underground, while in the streets, the last lively dances mark the end of the festivities. The Great St. Bernard Pass is undoubtedly one of the most visible passes along the long border that the region shares with Switzerland. The Great St. Bernard Hospice is moreover the only refuge open during the winter for those who, like Napoleon and his army in 1800, might attempt to use the pass. A statue of St. Bernard standing at an altitude of 2,472 meters marks the descent into the Étrouble Valley. It's mid-February, And lower down in the hamlets of Gignod, a carnival is in full swing. The costumes are inspired by Napoleon's Italian campaign. Bears are also present, representing the cycle of the seasons. Mules' tails, symbolizing the winds, are meant to avert unhealthy air currents. Mirrors are supposed to ward off evil spirits, and the color red is the symbol of strength and vigor. Our costumes were inspired by the uniforms worn by Napoleon's soldiers. The mirrors are to exorcise the evil spirits, the spirits that dwell here all year long. But once we've driven them off, the festivities can begin. Thus disguised, the procession makes the rounds of all the hamlets in the commune. All the families in every village we go through give us something to eat and drink. And we bring a little bit of carnival and music. People sing and dance. It brings us all together once a year. Let's remain in the north of Aosta to discover the Valdôtain Valley, another mythical place in the region. It was from here that many of the great expeditions to the Italian side of the Matterhorn began, including Walter Bonatti's last climb. In those days, neither the road nor the Breathtaking ski resort existed. The exploits of these guides and alpinists have inspired many artists, such as Gabriele Marchignaz, whose house is a work of art in itself. Himself a skier from a very young age, he was quickly attracted to raw materials that reflected the atmosphere of the surrounding peaks, but not without adding a contemporary touch. This ice pick, for example, is a metaphor to express a sort of political protest. The ice pick is the ice pick of freedom of mountain peoples. I created it as a message to the Italian government, if you like. His works reflect his anger at the damage that has been done to nature, the environment, and to the mountains. This work here is a tribute to the many guides who have attempted to climb the Matterhorn. This work symbolizes the ascent of a mountain. The faces cut into this metal are the mountain guides, the guides of the Aosta Valley, but especially the mountain guides, for ultimately they represent the search for spirituality and for God. Admittedly, once you get to the Breathtaking ski resort, the sight of all these mountain peaks is simply breathtaking, and the Matterhorn is the climax. A stop at the guide's office is a must. Located in the center of the Breathtaking resort, it celebrates many of the Italian mountaineering exploits. Inside, you can find many historic materials and documents. A few years ago, this small hut that once served as a refuge for the final stages of the ascent was brought back down into the town. It was located at 3,840 meters above sea level at the base of the Matterhorn until 2003. It's the living testimony to the climbers who made it to the summit of the Matterhorn. As you gradually go up in altitude, the Matterhorn changes in appearance. From the other side, from the Swiss side of the Matterhorn, you can even better appreciate the sheer rock face that leads to the summit at 4,478 meters. But let's return to the Italian side. Here, many of the farms located at the base of the mountain have since been converted to tourism. Most of the restaurants that you see on the ski slopes are actually former farms, and that's a part of our history. It's a tradition that continues because it was the farmers' sons who decided to convert these farms, and now there are restaurants on the slopes, such as those we saw today. This magnificent setting, with its 351 kilometers of skiable trails, has become almost commonplace to the future champions of the local ski club, who train on them diligently every day. Around the Matterhorn and Val Tournanche, there are small protected valleys where, from the onset, it was decided not to build roads in order to avoid the presence of motor vehicles. Chenay is such a village. A cable car at the bottom of the village is the only means of access to it for people carrying their shopping or parcels. At nearly 1,800 meters altitude, nestled in the woods, the hamlet jealously guards its tranquility, and it is not about to allow vehicles to disturb it. In summer, a path connects the hamlet to other isolated villages that have made the same choice. The most well-known of these villages is Chamois. Perched at 1,800 meters on a cliff top that dominates the landscape, it's only accessible by cable car from Buisson, a village down below in the valley. Today, Chamois welcomes tourists. There are hotels and ski slopes, but the inhabitants still refuse to be connected by road so as not to be invaded by cars. Attilo Ducli, the former mayor, remembers the days when there was not even a cable car. We used to walk up from Buisson to Chamois here. It took an hour and a half. And we had to descend every so often to get the supplies that we needed. Rice, corn, things that we didn't produce up here. We said no to the road. We didn't want the noise of cars, the fumes, and all the rest. We always wanted to keep our tranquility, and so we decided to build a cable car instead. This has not prevented the village from developing a compatible tourist trade. Its tranquility, on the contrary, makes it a cherished spot amongst skiers and mountaineers. It's life in the mountains. Being able to listen to the words of silence, that's the most important thing. Another jealously guarded place is the Montavic Natural Park, but it holds no secrets for the great mountaineer Abbé Blanc, who successfully climbed the world's 14 recognized peaks over 8,000 meters. With industrialization, the need for metals, including iron, grew, and this place is a mine of magnetite. They took the ore down to the forest where there was a smelting oven, and they processed it. All that remains of the mines in the park today are the trails that gave access to the high-altitude lake. Ibexes and chamois have long since repossessed the area. This is one of the last remaining wild places in the Aosta Valley. It's not yet that well known, so it's really an opportunity to discover the most beautiful and wildest part of the valley. Peat bogs and lakes are interspersed throughout the park, as well as a few rare and beautifully situated alpine pastures. For centuries, the inhabitants of the mountain villages of Champ-de-Praz and Champ-Porcher practiced a subsistence economy based on pastoralism.
With the wind in your hair, the way that you run through the fields that makes us touch down to earth. You're just a shadow of who you once were. Are we all shadows of who we once were?
Less wild than the neighboring park, the Gressoney and Ayas valleys have a special status in this region, as they've been heavily influenced by their Swiss neighbors. We're in Chalon-Saint-Victor, in the Isolas district. We're going to visit Mauro Savin's workshop. We met him earlier at the fair of Saint-Ursus, where he'd vaunted the merits of his cowbells. His family have been blacksmiths from father to son for 4 generations. Mauro does everything himself. The pieces are first heated. They're stamped to the desired size and then adjusted. This is precision work. Next, he's going to assemble the 2 halves of the bell. But the most important step, according to Mauro, is not the forging itself, but rather the magical moment when his talents as a craftsman cede to his musical ear. The sound must be crystalline. Crystalline. And there are several different sounds. There are 3. 3. There, that's good. Today, Mauro regrets not being able to find a young apprentice to train and take over from him. I realize that you can't find any passionate young people to take over this work. I guess a musical ear is not given to everyone. This is a job that requires passion. I really think that. At the far end of the Aosta Valley, we come to Champoluc. This little village is one of the gateways to the Monte Rosa Massif. The Massif includes several peaks on the Swiss-Italian border. The Dufour-Spitze, over 4,600 meters in altitude, is in Thuile in Switzerland. Here we can cross the Lys Glacier, one of the last large glaciers in Europe. Champoluc is at an altitude of 1,500 meters and is surrounded by several hamlets that still have traditional houses called rascals. Before leaving for the Lys Valley itself, let's take some time to visit Fort Bard. Of all the strongholds, castles and military buildings in the Aosta region, this one is the most imposing. As early as the 5th century, the site controlled the historic routes to France and Switzerland. The region near the fort specializes in the cultivation of chestnuts. Autumn is the harvest season in the village of Liliane, located at the base of the Lys Valley. At an altitude of 655 meters, the Cooperativa Il Riccio is the leading producer of chestnuts in the region. The co-op's high-quality nuts are greatly appreciated throughout Italy. Every family brings in their harvest here, where it's weighed and controlled. For hundreds of years, chestnuts were a staple crop that provided food during the winter. They were dried in the autumn in special buildings called grès.
Ok, queste
29.
Parmi la carità, 29, faccio una finta, sì. Voilà, 29. Voilà, stasera tu la ricevetta.
E la prossima.
Ok.
Grazie.
Voilà.
Ciao, alla prossima.
Ciao, alla prossima. Noi siamo, diciamo, il centro della
Chestnuts are still very important in these lower valleys.
ed è stata e anche la
The
sede
first
della
chestnut
prima
production sites
campagna
in the Aosta Valley and even in Piedmont were established here,
e forse in
and now they're renowned throughout
Italia
Italy.
è molto sentita la coltivazione della castagna.
After the chestnuts are sorted and graded, some of them are processed on the spot. They're transformed into syrup, chestnut cream, flour, or flakes. A chestnut beer is even produced called Gras beer. In the region, chestnuts are still used in traditional dishes. They're usually eaten with traditional charcuteries such as pork and dried beef, made into soups or accompanied simply by butter or mountain milk. At the end of the harvest, there's even a chestnut festival, and a special mass is celebrated in the beautiful church of Liliane. Climbing the trail along the lower Lys Valley towards Perlos on a long path that appears to be lost in the mountain, we come to the hamlet of Schemp that could be living in another age. And for good reason. It's an abandoned village that Angelo Giuseppe Bettino, an artist better known as Pino, decided to revive by populating it with his own works of art, as well as works by several other artists. A lot of artists made sculptures, like this one, and then they just left them here. Pino is also a poet. In the dream, she's carried away by the wind. But in the dream, she's invisible. On her journey, she collides with a veil that the wind is blowing in the opposite direction. And then, at that very moment, they both become visible. Pinault has done wonderful work over the years. He has restored several houses, cut out brambles, cleared paths, and created works in wood, in iron, and in bronze. He's given life back to this hamlet by turning it into an open-air museum. At the extremity of his property, you can admire Christ of the Woods. This magnificent bronze sculpture was set into the rock in 2012. The vast majority of the houses are no longer actually habitable, but the mere presence of these works of art gives life and atmosphere to the hamlet. We head up the Lys Valley towards Gressoney. This is Walser territory, a Burgundian people who in the 13th century migrated from Zermatt to colonize this valley, bringing with them their language and their particular style of wooden houses called Stadel.
The lower half was made of stone. It contained the stable. The upper half was made of wood. It contained the hayloft and a storage area for hay and grains.
Between the stone layer and the wooden layer, a mushroom-shaped stone column prevented rodents from climbing into the granary. The majority of these stadels date from the 16th century. Some have been converted into holiday homes. Others are still used in the summer by herders. From the belvedere that dominates the Gressoney-Saint-Jean Valley, we can see Savoia Castle. This was the summer residence of Queen Margherita of Savoy, who lived there until 1925. Passionate about mountains and nature, the Queen transformed this medieval manor into a unique home. She planted gardens around the castle that could have rivaled the beauty of those of Louis II of Bavaria. Dominated by the Liscam Glacier and the imposing Monte Rosa Massif, Gressoney-Saint-Jean is the center of Walser culture. Originally from the Bernese Oberland, the people are German-speaking, which is an exception in the French-speaking Aosta Valley. The German dialect they speak is called Titsch. The village, still very much influenced by its Walser origins, is considered one of the most beautiful in the valley. Just outside the village, at an altitude of 1,200 meters, two farmer friends have created an eatable landscape, a garden where traditional vegetables are grown. The excellent results obtained here are the fruit of a rigorous selection of seeds that are capable of adapting to the local climate and soils. These include cabbages, carrots, and old varieties of potatoes. Here we have several varieties of carrots. This, for example, is a nif. It's a carrot that comes from Switzerland, from Tuttino. It doesn't grow very long, but it has a very special taste. You might say it's slightly spicy. We have a sandy soil here. That's good for carrots. And it's not too hot either. Temperatures can be quite cool, especially in the mornings. Carrots like those two conditions, cool temperatures and sandy soils. Here's another alpine vegetable. In Italian it's called rutabaga. It's a cabbage, but it's not a cabbage grown for its leaves. It's the root that's eaten. In winter, it can be stored in a cellar for 4 to 5 months. And their old varieties of potatoes are very successful. This is an old variety of potato. It's Viscelentale. It comes from the Valais. That's another Walser region in Switzerland. We've researched old varieties grown in the Alps, and this one has interesting links to Gressoney. Gressoney is also a Walser community. So we grow this potato with pleasure. Let's go up the valley to an altitude of 1,627 meters, where we come to the highest village in the Lys Valley, Gressoney-La-Trinité. In the Middle Ages, it belonged to the bishopric of Sion. The Vineyards is a former 18th century farm that's been entirely restored and turned into a guest house. It's nevertheless retained its original materials.
In
the winter, they lived in these houses all together, people and animals, in winter when it was very cold. There was a bed and a little table, and next to that, the cows. They all slept together. These house stables, these Vineyards, are the last living vestiges of the Walser culture. And after admiring these houses and the chapels scattered amongst the surrounding hamlets, we take our leave of these valleys. Valleys with such a strong heritage and character, making the Aosta Valley a unique place in the heart of the Alps.